Few weeks ago, Tila and I decided to pull out the old sawmill and see if she could still give us some good cuts. Now, this is a pretty cheap sawmill. It's only a couple grand at Harbor Freight, and it definitely has its issues. But as it is with most tools, if you just take care of them, they'll last a good long time. For example, you can see me pressure washing the log prior to actually cutting into it, making sure that the dirt and the rocks that are stuck in the bark don't get stuck in my blade and cause me to have to buy a brand new blade. This is something I recommend doing even if you have a professional mill and not one of these manual ones. Since our homestead is a hobbyist homestead and we're not looking to produce or have a production level milling operation here, I'm okay with having to push the carriage back and forth for each board. It only takes about a minute to a minute and a half if it's hardwood to make each pass. That's not so bad. If you need 40 or 50 boards, you can usually get it done in about an hour if you got a couple of good helpers pulling the boards off and helping you to make adjustments when needed. For the experts who are watching this, yes, I know the log has got a pretty good bow in it, and I didn't address that before cutting, and that's causing me all kinds of issues that you can see here. But in my defense, we hadn't used this mill for about 5 years. It's been sitting in storage, and we've been out of the country for most of that time. So it's nice to get it back up and running, clean out the gas lines, clean the carb, and run a couple hours on it. Luckily, this was just a maple tree that fell nearby and needed to be cut down anyways. It was going to be firewood, and instead we used it to practice our milling. Even if we messed up every single one of these boards, it would be okay because we're not cutting for a specific project. We're just cutting for experience. Though I did try to make sure that each board had a nice square side, that they're about an inch thick so that when they dried, they would be able to be planed down to about 3/4 inches thick. And I left a live edge on a lot of these flat sawn boards. The live edge is the edge that still contains some of the bark. There's two reasons I do this. The first is because sometimes you might want to use that live edge for a decorative shelf or an interesting table. The second reason is because it gives you the maximum amount of use of that log, and you can always trim off that edge, making your board any width that you want in the future. It makes it a little bit harder to stack these and dry them out, but it gives you some more options once you have them completely dry. Once most of the live edge is eliminated, I'll go ahead and cut 5.5-inch wide maple boards here. The original water container was destroyed, so I used a bit of boat gas line and a siphon in order to get my water bottle to stand in for the water container. Since this was a pretty green tree, we probably didn't need to have water pouring on the blade nonstop to keep it cold and to keep it moist. A wet tree will typically provide plenty of cooling if you keep your cut speed up. However, I wanted to check the whole system and I wanted to give it a couple good passes. And here we have our actual cut speed. So we've got it down to about a minute per board and then another 30 seconds or so to roll the carriage back, adjust down, lock everything down, and start another cut. So a minute to a minute and a half per cut. And like I said, I have no idea what I'm going to use these boards for, but the tree fell in the woods and I was there to cut it. If you do decide to go out and get one of these cheap Harbor Freight Predator-powered sawmills, I will mention that the track is awfully flimsy. If you look closely, this track has been bolted all the way down 16.5 feet to a large 1/4-inch walled square tube, or should I say rectangle tube? It's about 2 inches by 4 inches on either side. That gives the whole system a lot more rigidity, and I don't have an inconsistency in my cuts as you sometimes see with these. The other issue is sometimes that carriage will fall as you're cutting because the clamps are not very strong. So you could see me putting a pair of vice grips on the crank and then jamming those against the carriage itself so that the crank cannot spin and lower the blade as we cut. I cut a lot of triangular shaped boards before I figured that trick out. Now, if you go with a Norwood or a Wood Miser, you're not going to have that problem. But if you're buying super cheaply manufactured tools, you're going to have to learn how to improvise. There's a cost to getting the cheap option. However, after learning all of its quirks and learning how to fix all the little tiny issues that come along with this model, I've grown to really love it. If I was running a business with this, I think I would have some frustrations because time lost is money lost. But if I'm just sitting at home cutting my own boards and I have to spend an hour figuring out why something is rattling or shaking, that's no big deal to me. Time is only money for the times of your life that you monetize. And I try not to monetize my time when I'm spending it out here at the lodge or at the homestead. This is my time, and I'm not going to count dollars and cents for every minute or every hour wasted. Though now that I look at the footage, I might have a third concern. There seems to be quite a bit of wiggle in this carriage. I might have to go back and tighten up some of the bolts or even box out the frame with a welder and bring back some of that rigidity that it had when I first assembled it. So here you have it, the fruits of our labor. Yes, the sawmill cost a lot more than if I was just to go out and buy these boards. However, I'm going to be able to mill thousands and thousands of boards over the course of my life, reducing the cost per board down to a couple of pennies. And that's why in a homestead, I always advocate for building capability over building up resources. As most of you guys know, if you've been a long-time viewer of the channel, I don't do sponsorships. There's a reason why I'm not yelling at you about Raid Shadow Legends or NordVPN. We get a lot of offers now that we have 400,000 subscribers, but I'd rather offer you something that you can enjoy that's made by the channel for you specifically. So I've got my published book out on Amazon. This is a hardcover version. Don't Die, a Survival Manual by yours truly. There's also ebook, there's paperback, and I'll be doing an audiobook version here shortly that you'll be able to listen to on the channel. But if you want to support us and you don't want to hear ads from other companies, pick up a copy of Don't Die, and that helps us keep this channel sponsor free.